It's Monday morning and we're sitting comfortably past 1K MRR with Clipflow. And at the same time, existential crises always abound. AI is taking all the jobs. It's destroying everything. Everything's cooked. Google Stitch is cooked. Figma. Retool just dropped their build versus buy report, and a couple of the numbers really surprised me. So just taking with a grain of salt that these numbers are written by and a product of the questions of people who use AI app building tools, because that's what Retool does. It's basically asking a whole bunch of their customers, should you build software? Should you buy software? What's happening? There's this whole terminology around shadow IT, which is like, oh, what are you doing under the guise of IT? Anyway, I'm going to go through what this report is signifying and also what I think you can do to make better decisions about when you should build versus when you should buy, because it's very easy to get carried away thinking, I'll just build everything. It's so much easier. And there are plenty of cases where it's not a good idea. So the numbers that really surprised me from this were over 35% of companies have already replaced at least one SaaS tool with something they built themselves. And over 78% are saying they're going to build more this year. And I wanted to look into what they're building, but this doesn't really go into that. We could make some assumptions about what that was, and also thinking about how complex a tool are they making. Finally, as I said at the start, we're building a software tool. Is it even worth building a SaaS product anymore? Is everyone just going to go out and build their own stuff and the market's too small and it's not worth doing? Or if you should be building software at all to sell, to make a commercial product. And I don't think it's binary. We've built our own tools internally for years. Like our last business, we scaled to over 50% market share in Australia for the industry we were in. And plenty of times we built tools and plenty of times we picked the wrong side of whether we should build or even in one case, we committed to over $100,000 a year, 3-year contract on something that did nothing for the business. And in other times, we've benefited massively from building our own tools and making our teams up to like 10 times more efficient than anyone else in the market doing it. So if you don't want to end up in a place where you're building something that costs way more to maintain than the cost of the subscription would, or you're not even sure what you'd be missing out on by not choosing to rent the experience and focus of a team, and if you don't want to watch competitors overtake you, because both of those mistakes can be very real and they can go both ways. So the precursor to this, in one of my previous videos, I covered the SaaSpocalypse a couple of months ago. I think it was like $300 billion got wiped from the stock market for software companies in a few weeks. And this was off the back of Anthropic announcing that they were releasing Cowork, and Cowork was going to handle legal, marketing, etc., all of these industries. And the market picked the businesses that were doing well in those industries with a typical SaaS pricing model, and then they wiped their valuation. Some of them, like I think Atlassian lost 48% in the space of a couple of days. The media did what the media does and drummed up a whole bunch of hype and fear around it, calling it the SaaSpocalypse. And it sort of looks like there could be a bit of truth to the numbers. Typically, I'd say that people in the market are overreacting, but I thought I'd look into it anyway. So before I start, said at the top, a Retool is an AI app building tool, and all of this research is from interviewing their customers. So before you go out and say like, oh my God, this is 78% of the whole market is going to start building their own tools or more tools in 2026. Keep in mind, this is the cream of the crop, the people who are already benefiting from these things, saying that they're going to do them. Now, that doesn't mean that the tail end of the market won't pick up the same steam. It just means that it's not there right now. So you have to take all of this research and all of these data points. They surveyed 817 Retool customers and builders. That in itself is a little bit loaded, and just keep that in mind with everything I'm going through here. So from the data here, it looks like the areas you'd expect it to get hit the first are getting hit first, which is workflow automations and internal admin tools. And it's stuff that every company, so we got acquired by a publicly traded company, and these big machines have always needed to be able to do this, but it's too expensive to dedicate your actual resources, the ones that are building for the external factors of the company, like for the customers. The internal admin tooling always gets deprioritized and put in the back burner. Like, we'll get to that. I know that'll help you do your job, but we'll get to that. In a surprising twist to absolutely nobody who's worked in a corporate environment, 60% of the people in the survey said that they'd built software outside of their IT oversight in the past year, with 25% saying that they do it frequently. This tracks pretty well with my own experience, which is that once you're inside a bigger company, everyone is over planning, over road mapping, and over committing resources to the point that the whole agile methodology just completely breaks because you do so much planning that you're no longer agile and you can't readjust your resources to build things that the teams actually need, which is where these tools are coming in and like swooping in, and people are going shadow IT. They're going around the rule book to build things that they need because they can now do it with less resources. Now, I don't think this signals the death of SaaS. Maybe a bit of a market correction because SaaS at the high level was extracting so much value for what they were offering. Like everyone's having a great time, seat-based pricing. It was costing people so much money and not typically able to serve each individual customer in a way that they needed to be served because they're building tools that have the potential to grow as far as possible, as wide as possible. It means that you have to make generalist tools. And then what that means is that all customers are marginally underserved. And typically in the past, at least, and probably still today, the SaaS tools have relied really heavily on being a nicer looking user interface on a relational database. And that layer is going to get crushed or at least compressed, especially the bigger businesses with higher expenses. So if you were one of those big SaaS platforms, you've expanded to the size of the amount of money you're making this much profit, you expand so far. Where you see a lot of the layoffs happening is they've realized that the future market can't support the profit levels necessarily, and so they have to reduce their expenses, so they start laying off in advance of that happening. So I think those guys are a risk, but I also think that anyone who can really effectively build solid data moats, decent network effects, and really clear guardrails for AI compliance so that people can use AI inside the tool, they're going to get stronger, and the bar for what's worth paying for is going to move because people can pay less to build it themselves. So I was wondering, why would people be doing this? And my gut feeling was that it would be all cost-based, like the SaaS platforms are taking too much money from me. But that's not what this retool study has found, whether or not you can trust the data. It was super interesting to me that of all the people asked why they built things, 31% said speed, and I believe that refers to like speed of support and speed of making new features that I need. 25% said unmet needs, and 18% said that their IT process inside their business was too slow. So that's like procurement. I want to use this tool, and IT says, okay, we'll look at that in 6 months. So I don't think speed is page performance. I think most big SaaS companies have pretty typically reasonable speed. They prioritize high performance and everything. I think this is waiting for the software tools to solve your problems and also getting customer support requests solved. And if you're sitting there waiting for something you need the product to do to be built, it makes sense from the SaaS business's side to not just build everything everyone wants, but those unmet needs are going to create an environment where people are thinking, I should go look at another tool, or in this case, I should go build another tool. And with IT teams taking too long to make decisions about whether or not you should be allowed to use a tool, getting it integrated into the environment. And typically, from my experience at least, it's usually we already have a tool that does 40% of the job. You have to really justify, why do you need this thing? And that is changing so fast with AI that I think a lot of businesses are going to get left behind if they don't figure out ways of speeding up this procurement service. So I'm obviously surprised that it's not cost, but it does make sense to me that contract negotiation, the sales cycle of SaaS at enterprise is way too long. You're like, I want it. And they're like, okay, well, you book a sales meeting, you book an implementation meeting, you book a this meeting and that meeting. And you finally get it implemented on a 6-month rollout. Of course, someone's going to go and build the tool if they have the capability and they never had the capability before. They're going to go around those systems because they want to be as effective as possible as soon as possible. So if you were a sales process only, heavy demo, heavy implementation team, I'd be trying to reduce the time it takes you to get customers onboarded as much as possible. Make it really fast, because if speed is a problem, that's how you combat the speed. If someone comes to your business and says, I want to start using your tool, and you say, okay, well, no worries, I'll book your meeting for 2 weeks' time. And they think, well, I could just build that somewhat good enough myself in a day. well, you're going to lose because everyone wants everything fast. And if your business doesn't support getting people onboarded that fast, well, that's something that you might have to look at fixing. And from the business side, if your business takes a long time to ingest new tools and bring them in, bring the values in for your team, you're going to want to watch out for this, because this is sort of exactly what happened about 10 years ago when Dropbox and Slack all started coming around. And because the tools that businesses were using weren't good enough, they might have had an internal intranet where you could message, or a G drive on a server that you could store files on, and then you would have to email something, link. All of those things were so poor inefficiency for businesses that everyone went outside of authorized tooling and just started using Dropbox and using Slack, to the point that the businesses had to catch up and say, oh yes, we'll let you use that now. I'll give you a quick example of just how corporate machines typically delay things and slow everything down. When we were moved into our acquiring business, the first cases of AI use in business were coming around. This is real early. This is ChatGPT's first release. And there was a panic because I think Samsung was using the public models, and all of their data was obviously fed back into the model, and someone was actually able to exfiltrate custom specs and documentation from that data out. And so Samsung had this huge lockdown, and our business obviously did the same, where they sent someone around to say, if you're going to use AI, you've got to go through an approval process, you've got to send an email, blah, blah, blah. I was already using it every day, so I sent through my approval process. That never got approved. Nothing ever happened with it. And I left about a year later and nothing ever happened with it. So the use of unauthorized software and the use of unauthorized tools is always going to happen in a business. People want to find the most efficient path in their mind to get a problem solved. And if you don't support figuring that out as fast as possible and approving or denying the things as fast as possible, having alternatives for the tools as fast as possible, you're going to get cooked. But I think if you're lucky enough not to be in the servicing enterprise, like B2E space, is that even a thing? B2E? I don't know. B and E, bacon and egg roll. If you're not in enterprise service and you're just in business to business, you've probably just got to look at the unmet needs component and figure out how you can build a community environment where people feel like they're having their needs answered and met and developed as fast as possible. Because if they can go and make a 70% as good tool themselves, there will be a time and a cost component that they have to figure out. I'll go into when I think you should build or buy things further on, but you've got to consider that all of your customers are going to be assessing you against not just the competitive products, but the I'll build it myself mentality. If you've never seen me before, my name's Daryl, and I don't claim to be an expert in any of this stuff, but have been building software and businesses for over 10 years. And we're now building another SaaS into this existential crisis laden. People won't need to buy SaaS anymore. This is the place that I talk about this stuff. And if you're building something and you know that you're going to need distribution, you should probably check Clipflow out as well, because it's an entire content management platform for the media side of any business that you're starting. So we've got teams replacing SaaS with custom-built tools, SaaS tools at risk for replacement, workflow automations, internal admin tools, business intelligence tools, CRMs and sales tools, form builders, project management, customer support, approval or routing, data integrations, and other. This is where I think it gets important, and this is where we see a lot of people get burned, including us. Building the thing, coding a thing is the easy part. I know that sounds reductive to say, but we've been through this enough times over the years to know exactly what comes after the build. And if you've watched my video where I put vibe coded features against Ken, our CTO and my co-founder with over 20 years experience, you probably already know where this is going. From the retool data we've got here, 72% of people are using AI to write discrete pieces of code, and they're stitching that into larger projects, and only 31% are actually prompting complete applications. So most people aren't building full tools. They're stitching together a few AI generated pieces and hoping it holds together. 1% are saying that they've built actual production software that their team is currently using, which sounds great unless you ask who's maintaining it and what does production software mean to them. Because, I mean, no one seems to be asking that from this data. And I think what's happening is, yes, a less perfectly coded tool is fine for internal tooling. It doesn't matter that much. And if it breaks, you can send someone to fix it. We're not talking necessarily about customer-facing products here, and I think everyone here is just trying to get faster in the back end so that they can spend more time building good product on the front end for the customer. So the features and pages, I was working on a research and development repo for Clipflow, and the output for one component was like 4,000 lines of code versus 900 for the one that Ken wrote, and over 21 component files versus 9, with like it had state management scattered everywhere. The nesting of components was too deep. Types were all cooked. And that was after me prompting it to try and clean it up and use the existing patterns and everything. Now, if you imagine someone doing this with no engineering background for an internal tool, it's probably fine for a while. But if the tool breaks in 6 months, whole team depends on it, who fixes it? The person who prompted it probably doesn't know how half of it works anymore. They probably don't remember the decisions they made, and the AI that generated it doesn't remember the context because that was in a different conversation, so it has to relearn again. And one of the paradoxes with building really useful tools for your internal team is that then they become so essential and they need it immediately working all the time. Well, then it might be time to promote it up into building it out properly. When we were building the software in our last business, we were religious, no thanks to me, it was all Ken, but we were religious about packaging updates, making sure people were constantly keeping up to date, making sure that nothing got too many versions behind. And after we left, the team had to upgrade a significant, like, full version. I think it was Rails 5 to Rails 6, which I think at the time was already 2 versions behind. Like, I think Rails 8 just came out, but maybe 5 was like there was too many security vulnerabilities. And that work took multiple people months to do because they hadn't been slowly doing it over time, and so much of the code had gotten out of date and no one was on top of it, and no one was doing the maintenance the whole time. Now, obviously, code is solved. It's getting easier to write. And package upgrades probably can be a bit better, but the bigger the code base, this was a monster code base, updating gets really expensive and really risky really fast if no one's on top of things like that. And you're likely to have problems, especially with security vulnerabilities. If anyone other than your team has access to any of these things inside a team, it's probably okay, but it still has things that break if you don't keep them up to date. So there is a maintenance cost associated with building your own there. If that was something that you cancelled a subscription for, part of what you were paying for was renting the experience and the focus of the team that's maintaining it. And all of the edge cases, all of the fixes, when something over here updates, this is fixed without you having to think about it. When you build it yourself, all of that's going to become your problem. And the cost is going to be pretty much invisible on day one. You might be aware of it, you might not be thinking about it, but it'll be compounding month over month. If all the other systems around it are getting upgraded, things are changing always, it gets harder and harder to maintain. And the bigger you get, this is why these things are good as a stopgap. Like, it's good for now, but then let's do it properly. The bigger it gets, the more confused it gets, the more confused the AI gets when it tries to write it, and then you need humans to come in, think about it a little bit. And that might not be the case forever, but it's definitely the case right now. So you might be able to build it in a day, but then you're going to be maintaining it for years. So you've got to be able to figure out if it's worth it. So having done the wrong thing plenty of times, we've been burnt on both sides. I think there's a couple of ways to think about it that can make it a lot clearer for you. And it's going to come down to 4 questions that you need to be able to answer. So firstly, you want to say, is this a commodity or is it core? So if the tool does something that every business needs in roughly the same way, like not just your business, every business, like email, project management, basic accounting, that's going to become commodity, and generally it's going to be a good idea to buy it, don't build it, because the maintenance cost for something generic is just not going to be worth it long term. If it touches something specific to how your business operates, like you have very specific workflows, specific data models, specific customer journey, that's core. And what might happen is it's a good idea to buy something until it gets to the point where it becomes core and then build it yourself is another option, because you'll have a lot more context about what you do and don't need inside of it. And that core stuff is going to be where building is going to make a lot more sense, because no SaaS product is going to shape it the exact way that you need in your business. And then secondly, you want to be thinking about, can you maintain it? Not just build it, but properly maintain it. If you don't have someone who can fix it when it breaks, you can have a ticking time bomb. And the paradox with this is that the more essential, the better a tool you build, the more essential it is to the team, the more disastrous when it breaks and something doesn't work. Honestly, the answer to this question probably will take away about 80% of the things that people think they should build versus buy if you have a careful think about it. Thirdly, trying to figure out what the real total cost is, which is not just the subscription versus the AI credits to build it, the total cost, which will include your time, your team's time, the maintenance of it, the opportunity cost of building this instead of making money in whatever way it is that your business makes money. Because what happens is people at a high level go, I can fix this problem. And they haven't quite done the costings, the long-term costings of maintaining it and everything. And they're not even considering their time in it. If you spend time thinking about it and your time's worth $10,000 an hour, you just spent 3 years worth of another subscription thinking about how it should work, not to even consider the long-term maintenance costs. And then that will end up with you paying yourself about $3 an hour to be your own IT department, essentially. And then fourth is, does it give you a significant competitive advantage? So if building your own tool means that you can do something that your competitors aren't doing because they're stuck with the same off-the-shelf software that everyone else is using, that might be a reason to build it. But you could also go looking for someone who's built it the way that you want and spend a bit more time trying to find the right person or team to align with versus spending more time building the exact thing. I saw this recently with Hey Dominic, who does YouTube videos and Instagram, and he has a program where he helps people make content, and he has built his own analytics dashboard for all of his customers. This is to give himself a competitive advantage when he's selling his product, which is a service product. He's got the tool on the back end of it, which makes his offer more valuable by association. You get not just my teachings, but you get this tool. That can be a case to build it yourself if the right tool doesn't exist. So build whatever's core to your workflow and the things that you can't buy off the shelf, and buy almost everything else that you can. The answer is almost always going to be to do both in the way software is heading. You'll probably start thinking of things like rooms, and your team and your AI agents can go into the room, and you might end up building the hallways. And you might end up building some of the rooms, or at least some of the rooms, until you can find a team that's doing that thing better. Connection and integration is getting better every day. Everyone's realizing that AI agents have to be able to connect into everything. That stuff's getting easier. You will end up making the hub and some of the spokes. You make the hallways and some of the rooms, and then you hire teams. By buying the software, you're hiring a team that's going to be really focused on that thing. So you get all of the improvements for free that you don't have time to go and implement. If you're in the hype cycle of all the AI products that are getting released, and like Claude Code just eliminated ads managers, great. I put that skill into my workflow. Then when next week someone comes out with a better version of the skill, I have to go figure out and do it, and I have to spend my time going and doing it. Versus if I find a team that's somewhat on the forefront and they're already seeing these things, that they're implementing them into their product, I'm going to start getting all of that stuff for free, or not for free. You have to pay for the software, but freer than if you had to be paying attention, implementing, and executing on every new thing that comes out. And if you can get this right, if you can figure out when to build, when to buy, and when to build and how far to build it before you buy, I think you're going to have a massive advantage in the way software is getting built in the future, the way businesses are getting built in the future, over the people who go all in on either side. It has to be flexible in this day and age. You have to know. You have to get really good at deciding, really analyzing when you see something that's like, God, this is going to replace my CMO. What do I have to do? What are the costs of maintaining it? All of those things. And keeping it really flexible, not falling into the trap that IT in publicly traded companies falls into, where everything has to go through procurement processes and everything is slow to change and adapt. And then finally, just to flip it for a second, because we're building a SaaS product right now, and this whole conversation is something that I'm thinking about all the time. If you're building SaaS, or you're even thinking about it, and when I say SaaS, I mean any business that has any sort of component that AI will destroy overnight, a couple of things to think about. Per seat pricing model that has powered the entire SaaS industry for over a decade is changing. It's not going to break entirely, but it is definitely going to change. And the companies that were built around this pricing and profit margins, and they're spending accordingly because previously the environment allowed them to have these exceptional valuations and profit margins, and the tools were leaving gaps in the user's needs. That's going to be a big part of why $300 billion gets taken out of all of these companies, and the middle is going to get squeezed the hardest. If you're a commodity SaaS tool, like if you're a commodity tool or service, a basic form builder, simple CRM, lightweight project management tool, you're going to be in the danger zone, and you've got to be always analyzing you're offering, be that a service or a software product, against the market and the capability of a tool to vibe code a solution. It doesn't have to be as good as your one. It doesn't have to be as perfect as your one. If you can vibe code the solution in an afternoon and it's close to good enough, you've got to keep that in mind, the time cost to the potential buyer versus the cost of your tool. Customers have been saying online that these tools don't meet our needs because XYZ. Well, now they have options. They have other ways of getting their solution. And if it's not your tool, well, then that's part of the market that you're going to be losing. You've got something that can't be easily replicated with real data, hopefully real network effects. Like the more people use it, the better it gets, and other tools can't keep up because you start expanding. Everything gets better about your product because it's expanding. Real compliance requirements, real depth and up-to-date knowledge. You're actually going to be in a stronger position than you ever were before, but the bar for the quality and the utility of the product is changing, and the tools that can clear the bar are going to be more valuable, not less. And there is a bit of a race in that regard to get above the bar as fast as possible so you can get market share to grow the network effects. Luckily for us, our experience was always in building marketplaces, hubs that did a lot of things well and not just one thing. We saw this heaps at Realbase when another competitor would come in who only did one or two pieces of what our tool could do. Say we did 7 things across all of these business workflows and they would do 1 or 2 things. The customer would say no because it only did 1 or 2 of the things and the cost of migrating off it was too hard. So there is a consideration for cost switching and a consideration for is it worth changing for the benefits of one. And if you do one thing really well, it can still not be worth changing all the other things because you've just increased the number of different costs across different departments that someone has to consider before they consider switching. And what would happen with us back then is the competitor would come in, try and sell the benefit of their product, which only did one pillar. And then that customer would say, no, thanks, Jeff. They'd come to us and say, this tool just came to us and said it does this. Can you do this? And we'd be like, yes or no, depending. But sometimes it would be yes, because, well, great, we're going to take and do that thing because it's a risk to us if we don't do it. And this helped us keep a almost entirely zero churn across all of our customers. Not all of them. Pretty much everyone who onboarded and activated, we never had any churn because there was so much lock-in, so many features. It was almost impossible for anyone else who was competing in the market at that time to destabilize what we were able to offer. And we're already seeing this with Clipflow. So the benefit of having everything in one place for the customers is really strong versus the other tools, which might do one of the things really well. It's all in one place here and it does all these other things. That starts giving us a competitive moat. And any tools that are out there that are doing one thing well, they actually have to push the other way and they have to start pushing into the doing everything territory. And that's where code gets harder. That's where you need a team. That's where you need people making money so that they can grow this product and focus on it, which it's quite hard to do if you've started the other way around from one thing as opposed to building the foundation first. And we're obviously going to keep trying to leverage that strength. We've got a strength in that we have people writing code who are very experienced, and we've been doing it for a long time, figuring out the strategy and the right way of making a tool that does everything make sense for an individual. We're just going to be playing off that. The SaaS that's going to survive is the ones that can't be vibe coded in a weekend, even though my strongest belief is that the coding is not the thing. The service around the software, the execution of migrations, the execution of upgrading, all of these things matter so much more than the ability to write the code. And the teams that know that already are going to be at a huge advantage. But if it can be built in a weekend, that's probably a pretty good filter for whether or not what you're building matters. Remember that there's nothing wrong with building a tool in a weekend, but you have to be willing to stick through it, through the actual hard parts, which come after the initial coding. When you have to go find customers, you have to listen to the customers, you have to talk to the customers and keep developing the product into something that can command multiple millions of dollars a year in revenue from people who could go and build it themselves. That is still the hard part. So if you're going to vibe code and quickly build something up, or if you're building a small tool, just know that the only thing that's going to separate you from everyone else is you have to be in it for a long time. You have to be doing it for a long time. You have to care about what you're doing. You have to care about the customer more than they care about themselves, if that makes sense. They are going to go and try and build whatever solves their problem. The best way for you to find what problems they need solving is to offer the service in their market, and then they will come and they will tell you. Peace.